Hi guys, welcome to the studio. I'm Heidi Jacobs and you are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania virtually. This video is sponsored by Yorkshire Grit. They kindly sent me some products. I'm going to try and use these when I make some lids for whatever I make today. Yeah, I hope everybody's having a great day so far. Really good to see everybody so far in the chat there. Hi Amy, Jiggy, Duncan, Richard. Good to see you guys. So today I'm just going to probably try and make a big platter, but to warm up, I'm going to go ahead and just throw about a 1 pound lump of clay just to kind of get it worked in. I haven't thrown at all today. So I usually want to try out with something small so I can get everything's going. So yeah, this is a little more than a pound. Might actually be closer to 2 pounds. So we can make a big vessel. And as you see me do the last few times, I'm just going to go ahead and center it. Then if you can change the camera to the overhead view so we can see what I'm doing. Hi, Barry. Hi, Doug. Hi, Carl. The camera's a little bit out. Let me adjust that so it's a little bit better. I've got Ben helping me go between cameras so you can see what my hands are doing. And now you'll see how many times I go to the water bin too. Hi, Fred. What's got me started in pottery, Amy? Well, I was a sculpture major in college, so I did a good bit of work with clay. I was fascinated with the science behind it. When I started in college, I was a pre-med or chemistry major, and then moved to art pretty quickly and started taking some sculpture classes and fell in love with the medium. After college, I didn't really do much of anything with that. I worked in point of sale, doing a lot of display work for stores and those kind of things. And then after I had my son, I got back into clay by buying a wheel. And while I had made a wheel before that, I bought a proper wheel. This one that I'm using right now is the clay boss wheel. And I fell in love with pottery and throwing, and it's been a love affair since. So about 3 years or so. And this clay is a bit hard, so it's not as malleable as the stuff that I have ready for the bigger throw today. See how it's wobbling a good bit. It's not been wedged very well. That's my fault. It's sat in a bag for a while in a ball. So the outside of the ball got a bit drier and the inside was wetter, so then it's harder to throw in. But I figured today I would go ahead and throw a nice meaty platter if we can get that successful. They don't always make the first throw. You know what I mean? And I'm sure you guys are used to that as well. When you're turning something, you might mess up or whatever. And so I have another lump of clay here if I have time, if something goes wrong, God forbid. But if it doesn't, eureka, I'll be able to throw another platter later today. Now, the difference between what I've been throwing the last few sessions with you guys and a platter is that obviously the larger amount of clay. And it also requires a bit more brute strength because it is a larger amount of clay. but it also requires more patience and time. So I'll only be able to throw one today. All right, we'll go ahead and trim the excess off this piece and throw it to the side. And all I'm using to trim this piece is this tool here. This is called a potter's knife. Basically just a wooden knife with a slightly angled edge that allows me to get down in there. It's got a nice pointy end, so I get a nice clean cut. And it's not super sharp or anything, but it does come in at an angle so that I can take away the clay easier. We'll just take the excess water out of the inside of this one. And that was a nice little warm up. Hey, Costas. Hi, Wayne. There we go. Now, after I've thrown my vessel, I can, add some distortions or different things like that. But in this case, because I've got a larger piece that I want to throw, I'm going to go ahead and just take this off the bat. And to do that, I have this trimming tool that I use also as a pry bar to pull the pieces off my pins. And basically, this is called a bat, similar to what you guys are doing with the chuck. This bat just goes into pins. So I've got these little holes drilled here that connect the pins that are on my bat. They have, what are those screws? I forget what they're called, but they're like lug nuts that go on the bottom that you can twist and get it tighter if they come loose. If these break or they, get smaller and you need to replace them, you can do that. If you buy a wheel that doesn't have pins, you can buy a bat system that basically uses a sticky bat, they're called. It's almost like a chamois cloth. It goes down over the wheel head, and then you put the bats on that, and it kind of sticks because of, the water. All right. So this bat is made out of plastic, and it's nice and sturdy, but the thing with these is that you cannot leave your piece to dry on these because it will end up warping the plastic, and there's no bending it back once it's been warped. These don't cost too much. It's about $15 a piece, depending on the size you get. And these are new, so they're not super easy to get down on the holes. And when I want to secure the bat, I want to lubricate it a little bit to get that suction so the piece will stick to it. And in this case, I'm going to be throwing with about 4 1/4 pounds. This is clay that I pre-wedged before the show today, and reclaim. So everything in my studio can be reused. This cutoff that I took from the other piece, I'll just toss it in my reclaim bucket, throw a little water in there. It will get softer, and I will put it in a plaster bowl that I have that will allow it to slowly dry. And then I'll wedge it, and I'll be able to throw it again. And with larger amounts of clay, I want to use my body more. Then if you can change the camera to the full view. Straight on me, please. So what I'm doing is I'm putting my elbows kind of into my rib cage and then using my body to push momentum forward. That way my arms don't get super exhausted when it's a larger amount of clay. When it's a smaller amount of clay, it's not that big of a deal. You still don't want to be fatiguing your shoulders and your arms, especially if you're doing like 20, 30 pieces for a batch out. But with these larger amounts of clay, you want to be using your whole body rather than just your arms. You go back to the overhead view. Thanks, Ben. And just like the smaller amounts of clay, I'm just doing them method of going up and going down. This is basically getting all of my molecules of clay body, clay particles, all facing the right direction, fitting into each other. This prevents any issues with S cracks later. And it also helps me to identify anything that might make trouble as I'm throwing the piece. Like, because this is reclaimed, there might be some leftover tools. Happen. Because this is reclaimed, there may be some extra pieces of clay that maybe a different amount of water saturation. So you've got like chunkier pieces in there. So you want to work those out. And all I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of feeling out to see if I feel any bubbles or anything in there. Because I wedged this pretty well, I don't think I'm going to have to do a whole lot of effort on the wheel to get it where I need it. Now, also because I'm using a softer clay, I'm going to have to be much more careful as I'm pulling up my walls and then stretching my sides to make the platter, if that makes sense. Now, just like for you guys, when you're thinking about how large a piece you can make on a turning, on a lathe, you need to make sure that your bat is wide enough so that the base is going to be able to extend past the region that it needs to. If you plan on trimming it later, which I will with the platter, I want to make sure that I give myself a little bit extra girth to the base of the pot. And I also want to make sure that it's got plenty of room on the bat itself, that it's not trying to creep over the edge. If I were trying to make something like a giant bowl or a giant planter, I would probably need to remove my splash pan because it's going to get in the way if I'm trying to make it even larger. You can machine your own bats to be even larger than, commercial bats if you plan to make those types of really large vessels. At this point in my craft, I'm not really interested in making giant vessels. Number one, I don't have the space to dry them. I don't have a large enough kiln to fire them. And it takes a pretty decent toll on your body the larger the mass of clay you're trying to throw. So all I'm doing now is I'm trying to identify how wide I want the base of this platter. And I think I'm where I want to be. So I'm going to start slowly but surely pulling up the walls. And if you've seen me work before, then you know that I really love a potter named Simon Leach from the UK. His family are renowned potters. He lives in Pennsylvania now, but he puts out tons and tons of videos on his YouTube channel that are for beginners all the way to intermediates. And one of the things that he says is that speed kills pot. Normally, when I'm throwing a cup, I might throw almost at full speed because I'm just used to that size cup. I know how thick my walls need to be. I can throw them pretty quickly. But with a platter, I have to be much more committed to each movement. And I have to go a bit slower. So right now, I'm just kind of pulling some of the clay to the outside that's on the inside, so I can start forming my walls a little bit better. When I'm making a cup, it's not as obvious what I'm doing, but basically I'm just really quickly doing that method of pulling that out to the outside. And it does it pretty quickly because there's not as much clay to move. In this case, I've got a good bit of clay to move, so I might want to use my sponge to help compress it down and move it out. But again, I'm not letting my arms do all of the movements and use all of the force in my arms. I'm also, again, putting my elbows into my rib cage and my hips. now what I've done is I've just pushed the outside in a little bit. This will help me when I go to pull up my walls. Hey, Red, how are ya? My buddy. Now, I left a good bit of clay on the bottom of this because, again, I'm planning on trimming it. And maybe after this, like I did before, maybe after the first show that we did, I put together a video of the whole process of what I made. So maybe I'll do that with this platter. You can see the trimming process too, because that's probably going to be pretty interesting to you. And again, just like if I were throwing a bowl, I'm going to pull up the sides before I do any kind of distortion. I want to make it a simple vessel up, and then I want to finish with making it wider, finish with giving it some distortion, that kind of stuff. I don't want to be rushing ahead and trying to apply any of that stuff yet, because I need to get my walls even, and I need to pull it up enough that I don't have super thick walls. And if I put too much water or too much clay on the piece, I can sponge it away or I can cut the clay away. But at this point, it's going pretty well. I've sped it up a little bit. And every time that I'm going back in here, I'm adding a little bit of moisture to keep it lubricated. And each time I go in, I'm grabbing clay from the bottom and pulling it up with my fingers. The outside hand that you see is basically a support, but I'm also putting enough pressure that I'm allowing my lower hands to kind of scoop up clay. And each time, again, as I'm pulling up, I want to make sure that I'm finishing the action. By finishing the action, I mean I'm going all the way up. I'm not stopping midway and taking my hands away. I'm going all the way up to the rim and then stopping. The other thing that you'll notice is that I'm also trying to make sure that my application of pressure is even all the way up once I get to a point where I've pulled that clay out of the walls. And now's the point where I'm going to start getting a bit slower in my methodology, because this is where everything can go wrong. My walls are getting a bit thin. I don't want to burst through anything. So there we go. We've got our pretty large bowl here. I'm going to remove some of this excess water that's in here. But while I'm removing it, I'm also compressing the bottom, again, to try and help secure that I'm not going to have any S-cracks while it's drying. By compressing the bottom, I'm pushing all of the particles together. That way they'll dry evenly. If it's not drying evenly, I can end up with cracking. And that cracking may not show up until I fired it. Now's the point where I want to start pushing out. And by pushing out, I'm literally pushing out on the outside so that I'm starting to form my platter. To do that, I'm just giving equal support on the inside and the outside, but I'm also pushing the clay out. And this method can take a while, so don't rush it. Don't get excited. Don't get excited here, folks. You might be able to get away with just doing one hand so you can watch it from the side. And you might end up thinking, oh, I like this shape. I don't want to go any further. I think this would make a dandy planter. I think one of my professors used to say, let the clay tell you what it wants to be. You can go in with any kind of expectations for what you want to make, but sometimes the clay is like, yeah, I'm not going to cooperate with you on that. I'm not interested in becoming that. And for this platter, I want to have kind of a bowl at the bottom, but a nice wide face. And I want to do the wide face because I want to do decorative glazing on it. Now I have to be careful because I don't want to stress out the base of the piece. And by the base, I don't mean the very bottom of the piece, but the part where it's just starting to come up and out, or sorry, come up and out. I want to be very careful because if that becomes too weak and it can't support the weight of what's above it, it will collapse as I'm pushing it out. And that might happen here. I'm not barring that from happening. I'm just saying that's a very common thing to happen, especially if you aren't going slow enough and aren't paying attention to what's happening. And if you see this come around here, I don't know if you can see that there, but there's a spot that popped. There must have been a bubble or a particle of some sort that came out. So I'll have to think about how I want to repair that later. And because I'm planning on adding texture to this, I'm not all that worried about it. I just want to make sure that it's not all the way through the piece. Because the last thing that I want to have happen is I complete the piece and then when it gets in the kiln, it breaks because there was one spot that just couldn't handle the pressure. So again, I'm just slowly but surely stretching this out, pushing the walls out. If you remember correctly, this was originally looking more like a tall planter. And I've moved away from putting my hand on the outside because I can't lubricate it as well. So I want to take less risk with touching the outside of it. And I'm just using my sponge and a little bit of water and slowly but surely going in, putting some stress and pushing it out. Looks like I lost Ben. We're trying to have him be my camera controller from the other room, but I think the device he was using overheated. I'm too hot, y'all. I'm too hot. All right, now this is the point where I need to be careful because this is now out so far that it might actually fall in on itself or fall out over. So what I want to do now is just kind of slowly but surely maybe push the bottom a little bit more, maybe to get a nice wider bowl part. But I want to be very careful because I don't want to encourage it to fall over itself and become a donut, which can happen. But there you go. Let's go to the full view. All right. So now what needs to happen is I need to let this set. The reason that I need to let this set is because, oh, Amy, no problem. I'll be putting this up so you can see the rest of it later. Okay. Good night. So what I need to do is let this set up and then I'll cut it off the bat in a little bit. And if I wanted to, before I cut it off the bat, I could bring it back here and do some distortion or add some slip or that kind of stuff to like give some texture, which I probably will do in a video. But what I need to figure out is how to get this off here without collapsing it because it is very light and thin around this outside edge. I don't want to jerk it and have it collapse. So I want to be very careful. And one thing that I can employ is a heat gun. Let me go get that now. And we'll heat it up and see if it gets a little bit stiffer, and then we'll take it off, okay? 1 second. So with the heat gun, I don't want to spend too much time drying it out because I want it to dry slowly, but I do want to get it dry enough that I can move it. So all I'm going to do is kind of work from the outside or the inside out while the pot is turning on the wheel. And all this is doing is just helping to set it up, thicken it up a little bit. I don't want to dry it all the way. Again, I want to do some trimming. I want to do some distortion. I want to play around with this nice area where I can add some texture. I basically just want to get it to a point where it's not going to collapse in this video. It should be all right. I'm going to move that out of the way so I don't accidentally step on it when my bare feet hurt. It'll be one of them hurts donuts. Hurts donuts. All right, while my hands are somewhat clean, I'm gonna go ahead and send you back to the overhead view. There we go. And I'm gonna use this tool to also help me find and pull off the sides. Ooh, nice. Turn this a little bit. And this way, I'm in better control by using a pry. And again, I'm going to be very sensitive about how I'm pulling this off and putting it over to the side. So there we go. Our platter, we'll leave that dry for a bit, probably a few hours, and then I'll come back and I'll trim it and I'll decorate it or whatever else I want to do before that. So I've got a pretty massive amount of clay left here. Let's throw something else, not a platter. Go ahead and cut this in half. I don't need that much clay. And when I cut clay in half, I just use a wire tool. This one just has like really nice handles, so I'm not just holding the wire and pulling it. You know, you want to protect your hands as best you can. You can make them out of just dowel rods and use a guitar string. They're cheap enough that I just buy them. This is probably about a little over 2 pounds, I'd say. So just go ahead and kind of work that into a ball. And I want to wet my bat again, just a little bit here. And then plop it down on there. Nothing magical about that. Just throwing it down, trying to get in the center as much as possible. And then it's as simple as coning up and pushing down and coning up and pushing down. Feel like everything where it should be. And right now it seems like I did a pretty bang up job wedging this stuff. Working out some tension, I guess. Okay. So for this, I was hoping that I'd be able to do this because I've been having fun throwing this type of vessel. It's a noodle bowl. And noodle bowls are great because everybody loves ramen, at least in my family. And I had a lot of requests over Christmas to make noodle bowls for people. And they're fairly simple and they look a little bit more interesting than just a regular cereal bowl. I have one to the side here that is bisque fired from one of my latest firing schedules. And it looks like this. It's got the holes so that you can put your chopsticks through and a rest for where your chopsticks will sit. And notice the angle. This is so that you can access your noodles a lot easier than just, a typical American bowl or a European bowl that's, got a really round belly. It's really hard to like move your noodles across the bowl and get them in your mouth. This shape allows you to move the noodles up the side and directly into your mouth. I used it last night. Well, I finished one last night for a poke bowl or a poke bowl, depending on where you are and how you say it. Basically, an exploded sushi roll. That's how we describe them here. So again, I'm just going to, because I know that I've wedged really well, I'm just going to kind of work this into the shape that I want as far as for the base goes. And then I'm going to push down in. And while I'm pushing down in, I'm feeling for any inconsistencies or bubbles or those kinds of things. And I'm going to go down in pretty good, pretty close to my bat because I don't trim these. I leave them sit on the bat so they get a nice flat bottom. But one thing that I'm doing right now, I don't know if you can see it, is my fingers are now going to kind of dig into the side to create a lip. And by doing that, it gives me a shelf. So with the shelf, I can pull up the clay with these two fingers. I can be pulling up the wall of the clay supported by this hand. And it allows me to have better control over what I'm doing. And if you're wondering how fast I'm pulling up, I'm kind of going with how fast the wheel head is spinning. And I want it to be in sync, but it doesn't absolutely have to be. You can go slower than the wheel head is turning. You can go faster and more deliberate, but you have to be careful because at some point you might create a twist in your piece because you went too fast. As Simon Leach says, speed kills pot. So I'm just going down in each time, again, finishing that motion all the way up to the top, compressing my rim with my fingers. I call it the Jesus sign. Pushing it down in so that my rim is nice and smooth and I'm not going to have any cracks later. It's the other place where you can end up developing cracks because something dried too quickly and it was uneven and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's not blah, blah, blah. And also by finishing the motion, I can see where my walls might be thinner or thicker. This is getting pretty tall, huh? And because I'm not just leaving this straight up and down, I want there to be a little bit of a thicker base to this because it does need to support that shape coming out, similar to the platter that we just did. Yes, it is foot operated, just like a sewing machine or some scroll saws. When I made my pottery wheel like 5 or 6 years ago, I made mine so that it used a variable speed scroll saw motor, and it had like I attached a handle to it so I could change the speed with my hand. However, because my hands were always wet, it was really annoying. So I definitely like the foot pedal better than the ones that you operate with a bar or a handle. The cheaper wheels that you can order from like eBay and China, those ones have those bars. Now what I'm doing is I'm starting to kind of push the clay so it comes into that V shape. Now this one's going to appear bigger than the other one. It is actually going to be bigger than the fired one because these will shrink something like 12 to 20% depending on your clay body. So it's important to know your clay body well so you can throw to the size that you need it to shrink to, if that makes sense. So if I'm throwing a coffee mug that I want to be like 3.5 inches, I might throw it to about just below 4 inches so that I have to trim and for shrinkage. It will shrink once while it's drying, and then it will shrink again in both kiln fires. And that's because it's basically releasing all of the water from between the molecules. And then the clay molecules then get shrunk and pushed closer and closer together, which shrinks the entire piece. Some porcelains will shrink 20%. For the clay that I'm using, it's got a heavy amount of sand and grog in it, so it does not shrink as much as something that would just be maybe clay alone. And this is probably going to be a bit overkill. I didn't need this much clay for a noodle bowl, but I thought it'd grow really big one. And I'm not using any tools right now to kind of keep it straight. I'm just using my hand. And now I've got my overall shape. But again, I don't need this much clay. It does not need to be this tall. So I can take what's called a needle tool or an ice pick. And all I'm going to do is take it around to the edge on one of the sides, use my finger on the inside to stabilize it, and then slowly turn my pottery wheel on to cut that excess clay away. Ooh, slimy. And then I'll just throw that excess clay in my plane. And you may be worried, like, oh my gosh, what did you do to your rim? It looks terrible. It looks terrible because I have to go back and clean it up. Oh my gosh, so slimy. So all I need to do there is just recompress that, and we're back in business. When I was first becoming a potter, I decided that I was terrified of doing that. I don't know why, but I was. And I had myself convinced I would never be able to do that right. I would always ruin my pieces, blah, 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 blah. But it ended up being fine. I learned how to do it, and I became a big girl. I got over myself. I have what's this little sponge here. It's really nice for going around the rim and cleaning the rim up after something like that, or even just picking it up a mug up to get a nice round edge. So there's like a weird thing happening there. I probably, that's the area where I will cut the spoon rest, or the spoon rest, the chopstick rest. But for now, I'm going to move on to recompressing my bottom with my sponge here. I want to straighten my walls out. So right now, you can't really see it real well, but it's kind of going like a tulip, up and then out. I want it to be absolutely straight. So I'm going to take my straight edge from my potter's knife and lean it up against the outside edge of my piece. But before I do that, I'm going to take some of this excess clay away from the bottom so I can really get into that wall. And again, I'm just going to take this clay and put it in my reclaim later. All the way around there. And now take my tool and use my back as my stabilizer. Use my outside arm, stabilize it against my leg or against the outside of the wall of the pottery wheel, and then use my fingers on the inside to coach the clay up against that edge. And if I like this angle, then I'll leave it. But if I wanted to make it fan out more, I would just adjust the angle of my tool itself and go another go. And there we have it. There is the full shape of the noodle bowl. The other thing that I can do here, which I like doing on my noodle bowls just because I think it's fun, is I can take my little fish tool here. Got like a little fish face. These are called Muddy Girl tools. And this little hole that's through the center of it allows me to hold this in place. And what I want to do is just insert it into the bottom of the vessel, turn the wheel on, and let it naturally create my foot. Now I've got a nice little flip foot on the bottom. This presents two things. One, it makes it so that it's more interesting to look at. It makes it more stable, but it also means that if I want to use a glaze that might be a little less than stable, I have somewhere where the glaze might be able to go to pull up. And by pull up, I mean like where the glaze will run in the kiln. I don't want it to land on my kiln shelf. It'll just sit right on that lip. And when it's done, you can kind of see that edge there, which is nice. So the last thing I'm going to do is, again, just go in and make sure that the fish didn't do too much damage to my straight wall. Go ahead and belly that out just a little bit, not too much that it visually impacts the straight line that I have there. And, you know, what I might want to do is use one of my chatter tools to create some kind of knurling pattern or something on the outside for the glaze to create some really interesting looks. But what I'd like to do is let this set up so that I can do those things without overwhelming the shape itself. So I'll go ahead and again, just get my handy dandy tool there, pop this off the bat, or not pop it off the bat, pop it off the wheel head, and I've got a nice shaped noodle bowl. All right, so I've got one more blob of clay. Anybody interested in seeing any specific shape or technique? I'll go ahead and change the camera back to me. Well, I mean, the front face of me. Hi guys. But I don't want to short you guys on time or, you know, I want to give you guys a chance to ask any questions or see anything that you're interested in seeing or, whatever. All right. It doesn't look like anybody has any questions. Well, why don't I show you what I've been working on? So this is one piece that I did. This is hand built using a rolling pin that had texture in it, which was a lot of fun. Can I talk about the lamp behind me? This lamp? I think it's from IKEA. Is it stoneware? It is not high fire stoneware, but it is a type of stoneware. It's mid fire, so it fires to come stick. It's got a medium amount of grog in it, so there is some stability to it where I can do some sculptural work with it as well. But it is not it's not high fire stoneware like fireware or anything that you'd make like cookware out of. No, Ben will not sit behind me and make something with me. I'm not, no. He won't, he doesn't even fit. He doesn't even fit in my little space here. You should see, like he tries to get back here and he like hits his head off the walls. He can't. He's like, nah. That's why it's Heidi's not good, not Ben's. Unchained Melody playing. I recently made some Bernie mugs based on the meme that's going around, which was a lot of fun. I'm not super political or anything. It just was really interesting to me that took fire. It was really hilarious. So I made some of those for some folks. If you remember this guy, this was from last time you guys asked me to throw a bottle. I did like, an old school ship bottle for rum, which is fun. A small pottery oven. So a kiln, for a new one, which I just ordered, it was $3,500, and I got a bunch of bells and whistles with it, like electronic controller and air vents and all of that stuff built into it, and I got special coils and things for the elements. So it was pretty expensive. But my other kilns have been anywhere from like $80 to $500 because I bought them used from someone that, their mother did slip casting back in the 70s and sat in their basement for years. So you can find deals on them. Ben's planning on using one as a annealing kiln that I don't use anymore for pottery, which is fun. So multiple uses with them. Hodgepodge, you totally could. And I'd say like post pandemic, when we're all through it, you could probably reach out to a potter and see if you can get a private lesson if you wanted to give it a go. The other thing that you could do is just get yourself some self-hardening clay and play around with pinch pots and hand building pots. There's tons of videos out there for how to build pieces if you wanted to do that kind of work and just play around with it, see if you like the medium. If you wanted to do throwing, I would suggest, looking for a potter that has a wheel that could show you the ropes. Yeah. It for a brand new kiln, yeah, it absolutely is a lot of money. And I was really debating it, but the more I thought about where I want my small business to go, I was like, this is something insurance wise I should invest in. It's got all of the safety controls on it. And it's just, looking forward to the future of what I want to do. But if I were doing a hobby, I would have invested in a brand new kiln at all. Yeah, pottery lessons can be pretty decent. I give personal lessons like $50 a session, it's a 2-hour session plus materials, and you get your piece fired and you get to come back and glaze it. So, you know, it probably doesn't cover my time enough, but I'm of the mindset of most potters where it's like, I don't want to make money off of something that someone else taught me to do. I want to be able to share my craft and get more people excited about it. And put your lathe on end. Yeah, you know, there is a type of pottery that is done where you throw on a regular wheel, and then you take it to a lathe that's been specially set up for pottery while it's still leather hard, quite soft. You put it on the lathe head, and then you put all of your texture into the sides of the pieces, which gives you like some really um, amazing detail and treatment that you wouldn't get from, you know, trying to do it on the side, that you don't necessarily have an opportunity to do by hand. It's actually got, instead of having a banjo where you set your tool on and you go across, it's actually more like a machining lathe that you set it up, and the machine does the process across the piece. It was done in like the 20s and the early 10s, and the types of pottery that they were doing was overwhelmingly beautiful. All right, guys. Well, I'll give you a few minutes back. You guys can go get situated with, I think Costas is next after me. But if you guys have any questions, shoot me an email at Whitehall Pottery. It's whitehallpottery@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram at Whitehall Pottery. Um, you know, I'm around. I love to teach. I love to engage. So feel free to reach out. Jamie and Carl, thank you so much for putting this on, and Yorkshire Grit, thank you so much for being the sponsors this round. It's super fun, and I can't wait to use my Yorkshire Grit maybe later today if I make some lids. Who knows? I don't tend to like make bowls. I do that here, so I make lids. But I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Really enjoy the rest of the demos, and so happy you guys could all join us. And oh yeah, before you go, please like this video and subscribe if you can. That would really help me out. All right, take care, guys. I'll see you in the next couple of videos. I'll be in the chat room chatting you up. Bye.